I was born into a culture where vulnerability was not acceptable. And it still isn't, right? We are in what, 2025? It's still not. And it's maybe in some areas it is, but in many areas that I've been working in.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Growth Blueprint. I am your host, Tabitha May-Tolub, here with my amazing co-host, Christopher Rappold. How are you, Chris?
I'm doing well, Tabitha.
Awesome. This is a very exciting day, y'all. We are going international on the Growth Blueprint today with our guest. We are so excited to have her here. Ms. Kinita, thank you so much for being our guest today and making us global. I feel like this is a moment.
I love it too, because I get to leave my house without leaving my house.
The beauty of the web. Yeah. So let me tell you a little bit about Kinita. Kinita was born in India and has lived cross-culturally for 48 plus years, which, is strange because she's only 35, but that's okay. Between Canada and the USA, as the founder and CEO of SEMA Global Consulting, a USA-based global company, she's also a Gallup Global Certified Strength Coach, a published author, an international speaker with extensive experience as a DEIB practitioner. Her passion for women empowerment led her to begin an initiative in India for professional and business women called She Speaks. So you caught that, Chris, right? This is She Speaks today, right? Welcome, Kinita. We're very happy to have you here.
Thank you so much, Tabitha and Chris. I'm glad to be here.
So I'm going to get started, Kinita, with the first question, and it's really because we're just getting to know each other a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your background and involvement in creating environments that foster leadership and character growth.
Yeah, thank you. About 7 years ago, I started my company, SEMA Global Consulting, and it was on the heels of, or post my extensive experience with nonprofits, a lot of team leading, a lot of one-to-one mentoring, just a variety of opportunities for me to learn about myself, but then also learn about other people. And I really got passionate about that because I saw that folks were desiring to grow, but they didn't know how to. And so for me, it became kind of a personal journey in that space. I'm also a mother of 4 kids and 1 daughter-in-law and 2 grandkids. So 35 is a great number, Tabitha. Thank you so much. Yeah, so I think just, getting passionate about fostering leadership relationships, but it really starts with self-leadership. And so that's where, that's kind of how it all got going. And I brought it all under one roof.
Well, it sounds wonderful. There's something that I like about you already, and that is you're a certified strength coach, and having my team had gone through that process. I admire the approach, which is forget about, none of us are perfect human beings. Let's all make sure we lean into our strengths. Can you talk a little bit about that as it relates to your approach working with people?
Absolutely. And only a little. I get really passionate about strengths. And sometimes my husband's like, really, do we have to talk about that again? And anyways, SEMA Global Consulting is a strengths-based organization. And we really do focus on what our strengths are and then how we can leverage them and help other individuals also gain that opportunity or that ability to just live with those strengths, right? Implementing them. So for me, it was a personal journey, and I love to share, deep about that because it's so important. And I know that so many other people identify with it. I had a severe problem with anger many years ago. And long story short, basically, my husband had encouraged me to take the strengths assessment because a consultant had come to his company. And so they walked through it and he came home and told me about it. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm doing everything else. Let me try this. Little did I know that it became the secret sauce to really healing my heart, giving me new language, helping me identify clearly what was making me angry and why, and then really appreciating the fact that I really wasn't being allowed to live authentically in my relationships, in some of my relationships. I have to be careful because, who's listening? But no, in some of my relationships. And so I took that personally with the learning about strengths. And then as I became a coach several years later, it made sense to just really help people kind of identify it for them. And I've had a variety of clients that really appreciate their strengths. I ask a lot of questions. I get them to think about where they can use it. And a lot of people seem to think, which I'm sure, Chris, you've appreciated that as well. A lot of people seem to think that strengths are used only in certain jobs, or certain strengths can only be used in certain areas. And that is not the truth at all. Your strengths can be applied to any situation. So it's really important to empower folks, to help them really understand that they can use their strengths anywhere and everywhere. But we always have to be careful. So for me, what I did learn in that personal space was that I was overusing some strengths, and I just didn't know the names of them. So once I started to, take them down a notch and really understand why I was doing what I was doing, it became an incredibly valuable tool to help me navigate my own emotional world as well.
Yeah, it's a game changer. It absolutely is, and I'm delighted to see somebody with your level of expertise out there promoting that. I think it's such a humane way of teaching leadership compared to some of the other approaches that I've seen, because it honors the potential and the innate ability that that person has, instead of
Mhm.
trying. I find a lot of people try to morph themselves into somebody else, and I just think it's a lot of frustration, and as you well know, it's probably the wrong approach.
Yeah. And actually, that's a really important point that you're making, because I was finding that, I was trying to live authentically. And what I realized, and I think a lot of people go through this in their seasons too, is that other people wanted their version of me, not my version of me. And so, obviously, then in my coaching world, I'm seeing that a lot with my clients. But when we understand what our strengths are, it becomes a clarity, or a clear path to who we really are. It's our DNA, right? That's the language that Gallup uses. And I realize that if I can live into my strengths, that's what I'm giving someone authentically. And then I can't make an excuse around it, or I can't say it's not me. And then it also allows conversation when someone says, "Oh, I can't do that like you," or "I'm not good at networking," or "I'm not," and it's like, you know what? That's okay. Let's do your assessment and find out what you really can do and how we can grow you forward as well.
Love all that. And I really appreciate you sharing your journey into this, because I find that so many of our difficult emotions come from trying to put ourselves into a box that's not us, or not recognizing what we have to contribute. And the beauty of that is not only that authenticity, that we love that word. We love it when it
Yeah.
comes up on the podcast, but also our ability to work together, right? If I know what I'm good at, I know what I contribute, I know what I'm not so good at, I know what you contribute, that gives us that freedom to really work together.
It does. It does. And that word freedom is going to be different for everybody, right? And so what does that look like from a leadership standpoint? What does that look like from a cultural standpoint? So of course I have to introduce that a little bit, because when I was looking at my journey, I am what we call third culture, right? I was born in one culture, and then I have lived experience in total of 3 different countries, and 3 very distinct cultures, and Canadian and American. And let's go on the record and say they're both very different cultures. And when I was working through my own personal journey, then I realized how much I wasn't even able to live authentically into my culture. And so, what did that look like? What did that mean? I had to understand the nuances in my culture. I had to understand, what was speaking. Was it my Canadian background? Was it my Indian culture that was really being steeped at home? Or was it the fact that I now was married or am married to a white Dutch American, right? So now we have an interracial marriage and an intercultural family. And some people don't like labels, but we like them, we appreciate them, because then we could do something about it. And so, really understanding culture became kind of my heart song, if you will, not just for myself, but for other folks, to be able to help them navigate this road. And so we actually built a little workshop that helps people understand their strengths and their culture, and how they play together, and then how they don't, and what you can do about it.
I love that. I love that. Well, I feel like this is such an opportunity, because we've certainly had a diversity of clients, but I'm guests, but I'm not sure we've ever had anyone who's worked in sort of multiple countries. So one of the things we try to do is try to like what are we talking about when we talk about leadership and character? Like, how can we take everyone's definitions? What are the through lines? So I'd love to hear from you in your breadth of experience. How do you define leadership and character within the context that you work?
I think leadership is such a broad statement, like a broad title, right? To the extent where some people are like, well, I'm not a leader. I'm not a leader. And then, clearly we see some people who have titles and we think, oh, that person's a leader. Oh, but she's not, but he is, and he might be, or she might be. And I think it's important for us to realize that leadership shows up in a variety of ways, but it has to start with self. If we aren't leading ourselves, we better stop or really pay attention of how are we leading other people. And a lot of the work that we do is we really help individuals understand how they're going to lead themselves and where they need to go to understand that. So whether it's time management or it's understanding your own self-care, like what you need, or maybe even self-control. Self-leadership becomes the heart of leadership. So when my husband and I have worked with a variety of different leaders at different levels, and we often will find the same thing where I've spoken with other coaches and they've said, well, this is okay for my client, but we don't really do it, right? Alarm bells go off in my mind. I'm like, not true. I can't do it if I can't ask my client to do it if I'm not doing it myself, right? So I think for me, it's important that a leader really focuses in on to do what's right, not to just be right. And sometimes doing right means taking a risk, means kind of going against the green or swimming against the crowd, and just you got to do what's right for the sake of folks around us. I would say that. And secondly, I would say really focusing on character. We all know many leaders, or at least people who say that they're leaders, who don't have stellar character. I'm not saying I have the corner on the market or I'm able to judge who is good or not good, but clearly there are moments where we can recognize when a leader has poor character. And so it's important that we make sure we're kind of, shining our character or at least working on it so that it presents in an authentic way and that we could be healthier leaders that way as well.
I love that. I love that coming together. And I think this idea of this internal work has come up in a couple different ways. And I'm curious if you've got someone listening who's like, okay, am I leading myself? What's the gut check? How do we start reflecting on that or checking in with ourselves about this idea of self-leadership and whether we're really honoring that? Where do we start?
Yeah, I think first we need to admit, like, do we have goals? Some people really are goal oriented. I'm not. As much as I can say that I have the end in mind, like where do I want to be? Some might say that that's a goal, but it's not really anything specific. It's more like, okay, where do I want this? When I work with She Speaks, what do I want it to look like next year? Okay, maybe there's some goals, but how do I get there? So self-leadership for me, very specifically, is identifying where do I want to go? What am I going to do to get there? But more specifically, what am I willing to do? That will becomes that self-leadership. Am I going to read certain books? Am I going to get a coach? Am I going to, push myself? Am I going to identify my struggles? Am I going to own the fact that I might not be as qualified as I look, or I might be not as qualified as someone thinks? Am I willing to face my challenges? What does that look like for myself first? Where am I on this spectrum of, being a leader, or at least getting to that goal or getting to that destination that I want to be in? I have a little 3x5 card here in my office where it says, what we thought were destinations only proved to be way stations in the journey. And so that's also that self-leadership piece. Am I freaking out that I didn't meet that goal? Or am I like upset that I didn't get to that job or that position or in that conversation with so-and-so? Or am I appreciating the fact that this is how my journey is going to go, right? And I get to lead that. I get to pay attention to my character, my time management, self-control, my emotional health. How does my culture impact what I'm doing? I think there's a lot of things that we can do to really move ourselves forward.
Sounds like a lot of intentionality. Like whatever you're doing, just being like, let me think about this. Let me decide if this is what I actually want to be doing, how I want to be at this moment.
Yeah. And, thank you for saying that. I hope my third grade teacher and my high school teachers are listening. They probably aren't. But, anyways, I was often told, like, pay attention, think before you speak. And so I'm going to attribute the fact, like, maybe that minor thing called age, but also strengths. Understanding what my strengths are and then being intentional to leverage them. I think that's where it comes to the point of understanding kind of what's going on and really being intentional. But I also just say intentionality for myself. No one's going to be intentional for us. No one's going to be intentional for my dream or my goals, right? Or my destination. It has to be me. It has to start with me. And then I have to figure out, how do I bring other people on board?
Nita, in the process of doing that, I think you're probably, when you enter into a coaching relationship, you're probably coming up against somebody's perspective, and that perspective is what kind of created their belief structure, or maybe where the position that they're stuck in. Have you found some common misconceptions that are prevalent in the work you do, where people, when they're looking at leadership or character education, they're coming up against? Are there any commonalities across the different people that you work with?
Yeah, I would say in terms of misconceptions. So for one, I do a lot of women empowerment work, right? We'll talk about She Speaks in a little bit. I do a lot of women empowerment work, and that's partly because I really want to give back um, stuff that I've learned and how beneficial it is. And generally, us women speak the same language, generally. And so for me, what I've discovered is in this culture, specifically living in India and being around people that, really represent my heritage. And yet there's a disconnect because of my other experiences in Canada and the US. I'm noticing that there's such a cultural barrier, and so men have a certain perspective of what or how women should be. And some of the women are actually buying into that. And then that holds them back from the freedom to be the leader that they can be. Now, they don't have to get up on a stage and lead a bunch of people. They can do that in their homes. They can do that in their families. They can do that from their office desk in that role, wherever they are. And so I think one of the misconceptions is that women will become, they will roar like lions and get very aggressive, that they will overtake the men. There's a variety of things that start to happen. And so I remember one story specifically when I first moved to India. My husband and I moved here. We relocated probably about 4 years ago now. And somebody that we knew really well asked me point blank, so is your women empowerment work, is the goal of that to break up marriages? And I was like, wait, what? True story, right? And I was like, no, no. Um, my role to empower women is to help them find their voice and learn to live in the skin that they're in, and then share that with other people. I don't think that's so damaging, is it? But then I heard the backstory of his situation, and I'm like, okay, your wife's a little challenging, but not my problem. That's not at all women empowerment. So that would be, I think, some of the misconceptions, right? That there would be this uproar or this control thing that happens, aggression, those kinds of things.
That's very interesting. And really, the gift I think that you're giving people is the opportunity to be more of themselves. So I think when you when you unlock that potential within, really what you're doing is you're strengthening the relationships that they're in. You're not doing it harm. There is no threat. It's the exact opposite of what
Yeah.
somebody might perceive.
Absolutely. And for me, I learned, so after I got married, I was living in the US for about 9 years. We had a couple little kids. And like I said, we're in an interracial marriage, kind of learning the ropes of marriage, but then also parenting. And we've got 4 kids, really busy family. I realized at the 9-year mark, it was kind of significant that, wow, this is not going the way that I thought it was supposed to go, because I was assimilating. I was assimilating so hard and so deep that I was losing sight of me. And when I say assimilating, right, I moved into the US from Canada, and the culture in and of itself is an assimilating kind of culture. Come here and then be like us, and now we'll accept you. I'm saying that very carefully. Whereas in Canada, it's more and they don't use these terms, but it's more of a mosaic, right? There's a coming alongside with the different culture groups. So for me, it felt like some level of freedom. So coming into the US, there was this assimilation. So yep, I'm going to assimilate into our relationship, into the family, into this, into that. But it became very, for me, it became very toxic, I would say, because I was losing sight of who I was and who I'm created to be. And that just drove me to be like, oh no, we're not doing that. And it was like a sharp left turn. I don't mean that politically in any shape or form. It's just in my story, it took a sharp left of like, whoa, we need to like figure this out. What is really going on? What's at the heart of this? And I can say I'm happily married for 31 years. We're celebrating next week. So it worked.
Hey, oh, congratulations on that. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Especially since you're only 35. So
Right.
I love I love this feels like a natural segue into some talk about the resistance and controversy you faced it, because I think what you talk about, the work that you do, it's hard work and it's complicated work. And I don't think it's a big secret that when we help people find their voice, other people get scared. And I'll say that as a broad sweep, and we can take it in whatever
Right.
direction we want. But I think that's a truth, right? Like when we give people power in their voice, other people get a little scared. So
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about some of the resistance and controversy you found in your work as you've been trying to do this meaningful work.
Yeah. I think, some of the controversy would be around, well, let me just start with this. What drives me to do this? It's not the controversy. It's the light that I see, the spark that I see in the women that I work with. And I've worked with a lot of men too, and I've also seen the spark there. Um, but I think it's fair to say, especially in this culture, there are so many resources and opportunities available for men, but not for women. And I often think that that's one of the reasons I was called to be back here in this space, to really start turning the lights on. A lot these When I see the lights go on in a woman where she feels heard for the first time, where she feels seen, where she doesn't feel judged, she doesn't feel criticized or belittled. Now, I'm not, and again, broad sweeps, right? Like, I'm not saying that every woman experiences that, but I think generally. So when I see the light bulbs go off, that's what drives me. And so, what's the controversy? Okay, the controversy is, again, giving voice in a place where maybe others don't want that voice. Because if there's a level of oppression that's actually working, an abuse of power that's actually working, or something that it's working, why would they want something different? And I'm not going to say that that's specific to the US, or sorry, specific to India. I do think it's in a variety of cultures. I think whether it's a home culture, whether it's a country culture, uh, and a variety of other areas, culture, when there's abuse of power, I think that would be definitely a controversy, or a roadblock, if you will. The other thing for me is that because I'm third culture, I'm often not Indian enough when I'm here. And when I'm in the US, I'm not American enough. That's for a whole nother conversation, right? And so that really drives me with the DEIB work, the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, really focusing on inclusion. How can we help people feel like they're part of the table? They're at the table. There's a seat at the table. There's conversation available for them. So some are finding that very controversial. Some are finding that to be an intense roadblock. And I'm just saying, no, there needs to be room on this planet for all of us. And we each have a responsibility to make room at the table for those voices.
Love your description of when the light comes on. I think that's probably a feeling and experience both Chris and I have had working with
Yeah.
humans, when all of a sudden they see themselves in a new way, or they
Yeah.
feel their voice in a new way, or they just understand themselves better. That is magical, and I love that. And for me in these spaces, that's what it's about as well. How can we
Yeah.
just give people the voice and the space to be who they are,
Yeah.
knowing that
And
that's going to make us all stronger.
sure. And you know what I've realized is maybe I'm the person that's just here to turn the light on. And maybe the next person, whoever that is, and hopefully they're getting into a better path, the next person is going to, keep things plugged in so that electricity keeps going, right? Like there's different things different analogies we can use. Maybe it's, I just planted the seed. Now someone else is going to water it. And maybe someone else in their story is going to watch it bloom. And then maybe someone else is going to harvest that bloomed flower for an opportunity. I've had to release that and say, it's okay if I'm just the seed planter. It's okay if I'm just the watering can. It's okay if I'm, whatever. It's really okay because we're all needed. We're all necessary. It's all necessary.
Yeah, that's a beautiful perspective as well. Sometimes I feel in my work maybe a little restlessness because I can't bring somebody the whole journey that I see in them. But looking at it from the perspective that I was that next step on their way, I think is a nice way to be able to look at the whole process. Kinita, a word that we have come up on the podcast quite a bit is the word vulnerability. And for the work that you do, you you must come face to face with people's inner vulnerabilities and sometimes a person's resistance to be vulnerable. Can you speak on both of those a little bit?
How long do we
She was
have?
warming up. Did you see her, Chris? I don't know
I
if she's
know.
like, I'm
I
ready.
love this. Yeah. Because again, if I can put culture on the table, it might be a broken record, but it's so, so valuable. I was born into a culture where vulnerability was not acceptable, and it still isn't, right? We are in what, 2025? It's still not. And it's maybe in some areas it is, but in many areas that I've been working in, it's not acceptable. And here's the thing, when we tell children when they're little, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry, they grow up into being adults holding that stuff back, and they keep it closed and they keep it, you know, tightly wrapped. Like it's not okay. And then you wonder why, I'll be careful. You wonder why the suicide rates are going up. You wonder why depression, anxiety, insecurities, all of those things are getting higher and higher and higher. Come on, we got to like take it down. And I think one of the best ways to do it is to learn the art of vulnerability, right? Brene Brown has a ton of work out there on this. I tend to be on the ground in the mud with this stuff. And for me, I do believe that vulnerability still has its place. It's important for us to be vulnerable in our relationships. And it's on a spectrum. It could be something as simple as somebody asking you, how was your day? You can say fine, or you can say it was a rough day. And you don't want to go further up. Is that vulnerable? Yeah, for some, that's enough. For most people, it's fine. I was in a women's event several years ago, and I still remember it because it was so funny. Some of the women we were talking about what it means to be vulnerable and what it means to be open and honest. So then I asked them, I said, anybody know what a woman's favorite 4-letter F word is? Gasp across the room and absolute silence. And the word is fine. The word is fine. They like to say fine. And so that really shuts off the vulnerability, or maybe it questions or challenges us, right? Another way to look at vulnerability is in India, women and children in this country are very vulnerable and at high risk. You don't have to look too far to find how high the statistics are on violence against women and children. And that then says, well, don't make yourself vulnerable. Again, right? It's constantly being challenged. And then being vulnerable in leadership has its place. If we share too much as a leader, then we're going to lose sight of what we're really trying to do, and it becomes about me. And so understanding a balance of, if you're seeing your client or team member wanting to share something and they're not ready to do that, then maybe share a little bit about your story. Maybe open up just a little bit to say, hey, you know what? I struggled with this last week. This is what happened. And I know it was hard. So I'm wondering, is that your story as well? Or how are you feeling about that? That starts to open people up. I see, what I'm experiencing here with a lot of my clients. They'll either break down into tears or they'll keep talking and opening up so much. Like there's like, it's a verbal diarrhea, right? Like are we allowed to say that on the air? There's just so many words that come out, right? And it's interesting because it's like, wow, nobody tapped that before for them. Nobody allowed them. Nobody gave them permission, or maybe they didn't get that for such a long time and they've had to bottle that up. So many of my clients have been so thankful for that vulnerability piece. And I think for me, I do take more risks and I tend to be a little bit more vulnerable here and open and engaging with folks because, like I said, we relocated here. I want to give back, and that means I have to give back from my heart. I have to give back from my soul and, from the fabric of who I am. And if I'm not doing that, then I need to just pack up and go back to the US.
Of all of the guests that we've had here, Kinita, I'm not sure we've ever had anyone speak about vulnerability and the potential physical threat to them being vulnerable. That's, from a cultural perspective, that's very, very interesting, and it's a position I've never stopped to consider. I've always thought about vulnerability as well. It's gonna make me feel maybe a little embarrassed, or just to the immediate people here. But there, yeah, I think you're our first guest to really talk about it in those terms, and that's got to be a tremendous hurdle for some people when yeah, with the culture, yeah.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And in this culture, it's, the Indian culture is a shame and honor based culture. So when you think of vulnerability, you're exposing yourself to shame, or someone might think that that's shameful. And so we kind of have to process what that looks like. And then the honor culture. Well, you wouldn't say that about your family, would you? You shouldn't say that. And it's like, well, I'm not disrespecting my family by saying I had some challenges in my childhood that really affected me and it wasn't okay. That is too much for some people here. So finding that line and being respectful at the same time. But like, I think in the end, vulnerability to me says, I'm owning my story and I'm going to take the risk to put some of it on the table right now because I want you to do the same. And I want us to grow forward together. My tagline for my company. Sorry, had to just put that plug in.
No, I think it makes me want to compliment the expertise you have. I've said this about Tabitha before. Sometimes I see that a lot of people seem to be adopting the term coach. Well, I'm a coach this, I'm a certified that. But the work that you do, the work that Tabitha does, it really requires a higher level of expertise because you're treading into some deep waters there. And if you're not masterful in your approach, you're not going to get the result.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think for me, what I try to remember is when I'm in a situation where someone's going to share something really deep, I need to position my heart, my mind, my soul, my being in a way that says, I've been there. I know what it feels like. Right. And I try to find at least one connecting word, which brings me to my strengths because connectedness is my number one. But I try to find something that I can connect in their story. I might not agree on what's going on in their story. I might not agree on their choices or the way they're living their life, or it doesn't really matter. That has nothing to do with helping a person feel seen and helping a person feel heard.
What I love about what you just shared is that that sort of like two-way ownership of vulnerability, right?
Yes.
Whether it's like a coach or a country or a system or a family, or this idea that like if we want people to be vulnerable and show up, which we know has very concrete
Yeah,
value, we also need to be responsible for creating those spaces where people feel
absolutely.
safe to do that. And
Absolutely.
that is, we can't just be like, be vulnerable, dump it out, right? Like we need to be
Yeah.
responsible for creating those spaces or containers. We
Right.
use that word a lot on this podcast. What
But
are the
that's good.
containers we can create so
Hmm.
people can be like, I'm safe here. I'm safe
Yeah,
here to share my pain, my shame, my whole self. It's going to
absolutely.
be okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's safe space. And I think if we as women, whether it's a physical safe space, relational safe space, and I know men also appreciate this. So I'm just broad strokes. We appreciate that safety. Are we going to surround ourselves with people that will provide that safety for us in one shape or form or another? And I think as coaches, that's absolutely crucial. But then it's also crucial as friends. It's also crucial as a spouse. It's also crucial as an employee. Like everywhere we go, we need to embrace that so that we can provide that for other people as well.
Well, I mean, Kinita, you've dropped so much wisdom on us in such a short amount of time.
Oh,
And I'm going to ask you to do something which I know is hard. I'm going to ask you to, because I think when I listen to really great podcasts, my head is swimming with like everything. And I'm like, oh, this is good stuff. How am I going to hold on to it? So if you could kind of leave our listeners with 3 sound bites that even if they forget everything else we've talked about, that they kind of hold on to and take with them into their leadership and into their life, what would those sound bites be?
absolutely. I think so. Character, authenticity, and integrity need to be at the heart of every leader, because it'll help them go so much further. It'll help them really pour out what they want for someone else. So character, authenticity, and integrity. The second thing I would say is keep being a student of yourself and of others. Don't just go to a course for the sake of the course, or a workshop. We have several, or a training or an event for somebody else or for a checked box. Be a student of yourself. Figure out what you need, why you need that, and what you're going to do about it. And last but not least, where I often sign all my books with this is a hashtag, which is hashtag live your story. Live your story. No one else is going to. So why not learn what it is, be that student, and live your own story? And then you can be confident about that, and live authentically in that space as well.
Love that. That's perfect. So, Kinita, before Chris kind of like brings us all together here and closes us out, where can people find you, learn more from you, get your book? Like, where can we get more Kinita? That's what I want.
Oh, that's such a treat. No, I was kidding. Okay, so my book is, I have a couple books on Amazon. You'll find them in the US, Canada, and the UK. I have a lot of hard copies here in India, so people can reach out to me there. SEMAglobalconsulting.com is our website. There is a contact page there that would be the best. We're also on Instagram as Kinita Schripsema, and I'm on LinkedIn. Tabitha, you and I are connected there as well. So I would love for people to reach out, have a conversation. You want to ask questions to clarify what I said. I would love that. I'm an extreme extrovert and I love a great dialogue.
Well, Kinita, I want to thank you for sharing your time and the depth of your expertise. You had a unique perspective we haven't had on the podcast, and I really want to honor that and just express my appreciation. I know our listeners will have a lot of tweaks and takeaways from listening to this, even if all they heard was your 3 bullet points. That was just really, really good. So our goal when Tabitha and I put this together is we wanted to take this topic from a nice to have to a must have for people that want to unlock their potential, for departments or nonprofits or organizations, people that are really trying to maximize their results. We really believe leadership and the character education that goes along with it is just such an important part of it. So by you giving us your time today, you've kind of helped us make this conversation not just a nice to have, but a must have. And I really think people that listen to this are going to feel very inspired by your words. So I want to thank you. And for our listeners, on behalf of myself, my partner, Tabitha May-Tolub, thank you for listening. We invite people who have joined in to please subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and share the Growth Blueprint podcast with others. I promise you, we will continue to do our very best to make sure each and every episode is packed with inspiration, strategies, and actionable steps so you can improve your container. Thank you, and we look forward to our next conversation. Thank you, Kinita.
Thank you. Thank you so much.